something so pivotal to what you said. We talked earlier about longevity, and you talked about, like, unpacking for a minute. Just, I think you said that, like, unpacking a ministry and sitting for a minute. What both of you mentioned about those stories is, like, Micah, for you, you mentioned the girl who you were kind of ministering to, and she was struggling with some relationships, and then later on you got to go to her wedding. For you guys who you're, Josiah, you mentioned young adults who you poured into, who now, like, they're functioning in ministry, they're pursuing more wisdom and knowledge through things like the Young Adult Today podcast. Both of those things required you to unpack in their lives, like
Hmm.
for you to sit and go, I'm invested in you in the long term. Right now, you don't have this, significant, relationship that's maybe healthy yet, but we're going to get you there. Like, it's going to take
Mm.
time. I'm going to sit with you through this. We're going to talk through this. And then on the other side of this, you're going to have a healthy, thriving relationship that we get to celebrate together.
What's up, guys? I'm Josiah Kennealy. Welcome to the Young Adults Today podcast and channel on YouTube, where every Monday we launch brand new episodes designed to help you grow in life and thrive in leadership as we reach the next generation for Christ in our world today. And wherever you're at, I'd love for you to type into the comments, how long have you been leading in young adult ministry? Thanks for the work that you're doing. Let us know what state you're in, and let us know how long you've been leading. There's a record number of young adult ministries starting right now here in 2025. And we're really excited because in leadership, longevity matters. Sticking with it and not just living out of a suitcase, but leading and living with longevity, staying a while, unpacking your bags. And we're going to talk about longevity in leadership. You guys are going to love our guests. They're our friends, Dillon and Shelby Scott. They've been in ministry together for more than a decade, based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, leading young adult ministries throughout Nevada and Northern California. And you are going to love our conversation. And before we jump into today's episode, want to let you know about two quick things. The first is May 16th through 18th this year in Alexandria, Minnesota at Lake Geneva, we have the Minnesota Young Adult Weekend. Won't be the same without you and your young adult ministry there. So join us and join hundreds of other young adults who are on fire for Jesus, looking to grow in godly community and looking to grow in their faith. The second thing we want to let you know about is a word from our sponsor, GFA World. At GFA, they have a paid apprentice program in Dallas, Texas, that right now, two of our young adults from the Young Adults Today podcast listeners and community they're in right now this paid 6-month apprenticeship, and you can join in too. You can find out more details when you visit gfa.org/apprenticeship. The link to register for the weekend and to find out more about GFA World's paid apprentice program, both links are in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening. And while you're at it, if you'd subscribe to this podcast and share it, it will help us reach more young adults with the message of Jesus and more leaders to be equipped. Until next time, we'll see you right back on this podcast as we start off a great episode. Talk soon, fam.
Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome to the Young Adults Today podcast. I'm Micah.
I'm Josiah Kennealy. We're joined by our friends, Dillon and Shelby Scott. What's up? How are you guys?
What's up? So good. Good to see you guys. Good to be on the podcast. Thanks for having us on. So excited.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. And we're going to have some fun with our audience today. And we're just going to dive into some conversations about young adult ministry. So, to kick things off, maybe we should just get started with, can you share maybe a little about your journey of life and story? However you guys want to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I kind of sort of grew up in the church. I had kind of a very loose relationship with the church, where the church I grew up in actually believed that before you were in high school, they didn't need to teach you scripture, because you just wouldn't understand it. It was more advanced, blah blah blah. And so I remember as a kid, my parents told me that I used to sneak into the back of the worship center, out of the kids' room. I'd like tell them I'm going to go to the bathroom or whatever, and I would sneak into the back of the sanctuary, and I would like listen to not only worship but the word. And so I felt like even as a kid, there was kind of like a weird intrigue, to not only like church, but also the Bible and the word, because it almost felt like a thing that I wasn't supposed to know. So um, I I ended up moving to Vegas when I was about 9 years old, and I found the church that I'm at now. I was really saved at a worship night where I just kind of felt a desperate moment of losing a lot of friends and family, and it really projected me into my relationship with Christ. Ended up being called into ministry, and at the point of deciding where I want to go, what I wanted to do, there was an opening at my church, and so I've now been attending my church for about 23 years now. I've been on staff for a little over 11,
Wow.
working here in some capacity. And the past almost 10 years now, I've been a pastor here. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Dylan and I have totally opposite stories.
Yeah.
So I did not grow up a believer. I'm a first generation Christian in my family. My family, I grew up with divorced parents. They divorced when I was really young, and then they both remarried when I was pretty young still. So all I've known was divorced parents, and they were not believers. And it wasn't until I had graduated high school, I was 18, graduated high school. I grew up with my mom in California. My dad lived in Vegas. And I ended up moving from California to Vegas. It was the first time in pretty much my whole life that I had the opportunity to live with my dad and kind of get to know that side of my family. And I'm from a small town in California. And so moving from a small town to a place that I have family, but I didn't have friends. I didn't know many people. And so very quickly, I was just lonely. And at the time, I didn't realize this, but the Holy Spirit was starting to speak to me and putting it on my heart that now is the time that I should really explore faith. And it was never a conversation in my family. In fact, I was so new to faith, I didn't know what basic terms meant. Like I knew going to church for the first time that they sang some songs and that they would talk about the Bible. And that was the basic knowledge that I had at the time, which is mind boggling. And so I actually had this expectation when I walked in that we were going to be singing Christmas songs because that's the only like Christian songs that I knew. And I was pleasantly surprised that there was music, but it was not Christmas songs. And so I went to church for the first time. And there was, I was just met with such a great community. And there was a pastor who I'd met on the first day. And he said, hey, there is a young adult group, because I was 18, there's a young adult group that meets once a week at a host home. It's like a Bible study. And if you want to get to know people your age, you should go to that. And so later that week, I think it was, I ended up going to that group and just kept coming back. And there was something so fresh about exploring faith and having grown up not knowing the Lord and then getting to know the Lord. It was like night and day for me. It was so vastly different, so stark of a difference that I don't think I could ever go back. And so it was probably 3 or 4 weeks of attending that I had that light bulb aha moment with Christ, and I gave my life to him. And continued to build relationships in the young adult small group. And at the time, it wasn't really a formal ministry at the church. It was just a Bible study that this older couple was just hosting in their home. And at the time, Dylan and another guy who were just a few years older than me, young adults themselves, were the ones that were leading that group and just trying to figure it out. He was working at the church, but he wasn't in like a ministry leadership role. He was like working, like those weird odd jobs. And so got to start meeting people, got plugged in. And about a year after coming to know the Lord, I really felt like God was calling me into full-time ministry. And so it's been, how long has it been now? 10 years, 10 plus years of pursuing that. Yeah.
It's amazing. I love your guys' story, and we're grateful to know you guys as friends. And, I think something that's powerful is you've experienced, even both of you personally and then together, as a young adult, the value of being plugged into a local church, plugged into an intergenerational Christian faith community, but also that has an emphasis on the next generation and providing discipleship pathways and community for young adults to explore what does it mean to follow
Mm.
Jesus as a 20-something. And then now you're in leadership. But what would you say as far as why is young adult ministry so vital and important?
Uh, well, I feel like I can speak to my own experience first, just as somebody who was a young adult, who was at the time I was facing um, major life decisions and questioning, where do I fit in all of this?
Mm.
What is my purpose? What do I believe? Even growing up in a family of non-believers, there's still the question of what do I believe and what do I not
Mm.
believe, and what values do I want to take into my adulthood. And so um, I think that for me at the time, it was so vastly important that I had a community that I could navigate that process with. That now, as a ministry leader, I see that and can relate to that for the young adult who is 18, maybe has a story like mine, or even has a story like Dillon's, where they're making these life decisions and they can go one way or another. And especially ministry in Las Vegas, where
Yeah.
it's such a unique culture,
Yeah.
where at 21, at 18, let me start there. At 18, this is such an adult culture is the best way to describe
Mm.
it. And what they are presented as options in life at 18 is going to take them to some really could take them to some really dark places. And then again at 21, just a few years later, you can have virtually anything in Vegas at your fingertips. And so now giving them the option to navigate that with a Christ-centered foundation as another option or avenue is just so vital in our context, I feel like.
Yeah. Whenever I counsel as a young adult pastor for a long time, I counsel a lot of young couples, and in the first year of their marriage, one of the things I always encourage is establishing a lot of healthy practices that will last them throughout their marriage. Establish some things in the early years, the first year, maybe even prior, like during the engagement phase, that you want to last, such as maybe praying together or reading scripture together, or when you're having a conversation, how are you inviting God into that discussion, whether that's verbally saying things like, Lord, we want you to be a part of this, but maybe it also is asking each other the question of, how does God fit into this picture, or how do we fit
Beautiful.
into what God is doing in this picture?
Yeah.
In the same way, I think that young adult ministry, when you're a young adult, you're establishing yourself as an adult, not only just a disciple of Christ, a mature follower of Christ, but also you're establishing yourself as just an individual. You're questioning everything that you've been taught as a kid. You're questioning the world around you. You're discovering what it's like to pay rent and to, work a 9 to 5 and to not be in school. Um, Equally as a marriage, I think establishing practices early as a young adult that are going to last you throughout your adulthood, despite the difficulties, the crises, the things that you're going to face, those spiritual practices of saying, how does God fit into my career? How does God fit into me paying rent? How do I glorify God by where I live, by where I interact with my environments? The same thing is establishing foundational habits as an adult. I think are equally as important as a young adult as like your first year of marriage, establishing those practices in the couple. So I think young adult ministry, I really see myself as coming alongside young adults to say, what practices are you establishing that are going to last throughout the rest of your adulthood, regardless of what you face or experience?
Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh. I saw just yesterday Ryan Burge on X. He has graphs about religion and he posted a graph. I can link to it in the show notes of this episode, wherever your podcast player is. But he tweets, when do people leave religion? And according to this survey of 2,400 nuns, those who are not religiously affiliated at all, nothing in particular, NONES, there's a specific window of time from 15 to 25 is when that 52% of the sample left religion. And that's more than half of non-religious folks head for the exits. He said that the most popular age was 18. And what I love about what you guys just said is that you guys are on the front lines, and there's two parts. There's one, like you could make the case that the world is Las Vegas. Like it's so similar, like just culture, access, even through globalization, technology. But there's then also the Las Vegas side of like, at least in Minneapolis, like the nickname is what? Sin City, right? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
like I think that what you guys are doing is so vital. It is so important to help set people on the right pathway and trajectory of life. And we love it.
Yeah. So when it comes to like you guys doing ministry through the local church, what does that look like in your context?
Yeah. So Dylan and I have kind of flip-flopped roles over the years. And so when we first started leading young adult, well, really, he first started leading young adults, and that's when I first started attending, was just in this Bible study small group setting. And as we pursued our relationship and then eventually got engaged and married, we started leading together. And through that, Dylan became the young adult pastor. Gosh, I don't even remember. This was years ago, obviously. But he became the young adult pastor, and we started building out from that small group and started formalizing the ministry. We linked arms with, at the time, our youth ministry, which has since grown and molded into our next gen ministry, and a lot of churches take that approach. And we work as a joint effort team. And so from that point, we have always worked closely with our kids and youth pastors and then also with our men's and women's ministry to see this transition kind of seamlessly go from the next step of life to the next step of life. And anyway, and so we just continue to build on top of that small group. And Dylan, when he was the young adult pastor, he had a split position with media production. And so he was doing half media production, half young adult ministry. And then I was an assistant. I was one of our facility director, her assistant. And so I was at the church, but I wasn't in the formal role. And as COVID hit, and now we're, I don't know, 5 or 6 years into leading young adult ministry, and we've added things. We've added multiple groups, and we've launched different things, events and services, and we've just done a lot of different things over the years. When COVID hit and everything went online, our senior leadership came to Dylan and said, "Hey, you are media production." And at the time he was the assistant prior to COVID. He was the assistant to our media production director to the guy had ended up shifting out of that role, and Dylan became the director of media production. So then COVID hits, and our senior leadership approaches him and says, "Hey, now is the time more than ever. We really would like for you to move fully into full-time media production. It's needed," as everything went online and all of that kind of shifted during that year. And they had approached me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to take the lead and be our young adult director?" And so that's how that kind of shifted. And really, I feel like Dylan opened up the door of opportunity for me to be able to move into that role. We were already kind of doing that together.
Yeah. Today, I think, you know how when you're the young pastor on staff and you're also doing media, you're like, you're the youngest one. You got it. You're good. So that split position for a long time, I honestly loved it. There was a lot of crossover. There was a lot of young adults who would serve in my media department, whether they were photographers or videographers. And so there was a lot of crossover, and it really did make sense. And I really enjoyed, honestly, both aspects of it. Today, I think what most of our ministry looks like, we have a lot of young adults who are empowered to lead portions of our ministry. So I know right now that there's a young adult who feels called to ministry. He really desires to be a worship pastor in the future. And so he came to us one day with a couple of other of our young adult leaders and was like, hey, we would really love to do like an acoustic worship set, maybe once a month, where young adults can just come seek the Lord, sing, pray, whatever, and just hear from him. And arguably, that's one of our most successful services right now. It's largely leader led from our young adults, where it's young adults who are leading young adults. And for the most part, I mean, I feel like we do pretty minimal work at that event. I take some pictures, I take some video. We give a little direction here and there of like, oh, I think it'd be cool if we set up like this, or, you know, maybe if we kind of had this sort of a theme for the service. But honestly, it's extremely minimal. It's one of our least laborious for us because our leaders love it. They step up. And honestly, we've seen God do so much, not only in the leadership team that leads that, but through young adults being led by other young adults. I think that they see great value in people that they're walking alongside with, like pursuing the Lord. If you want young adults to see what it's like to pursue the Lord, put a young adult in front of them who is pursuing the Lord, who's doing it, so that they can go, man, that's how you do it. This is how you pursue the Lord right here. And so I think that's been one of our most successful services. Besides that, we do, periodic events regularly, and then we run a number of small groups. Some of them are out of our home. Some of them are here at the church. Some of them are led by us. Some of them are led by other young adults. Largely, we've taken the model where we do a lot of mentorship and discipleship of our young adult leaders. And then our leaders are running a lot of those groups.
Well, what's funny too is I think it took us a few years to realize that when we were first leading young adult ministry, we were young adults. I still am. I'll hold on to it one more year in my 20s. But so those first few years, a part of it is we were the draw, meaning that we were more of a peer level. And now we're not the draw, and that's okay. We're the pastors. We're the people who are coming in to mentor and to disciple and to correct. And sometimes that's hard. And so when we realized, oh my gosh, they don't want to come because we're there. They want to go to an event or go be a part of a Bible study or whatever because other young adults are there who are being empowered. That was like breaking a code for us. That was, but it took a little bit of transition out of that peer role into that pastoral role over the few years as we got older, because we were at that peer level at first. And so there was some transition that needed to happen. And then that changing of recognizing, hey, they don't want to come hang out with us. They want to come hang out with each other. How do we capitalize on that?
It was also so relieving to not have to feel like I needed to be like the relevant or the cool pastor, I don't have to be the really cool, trendy, whatever. I can now wear whatever I want. I'm like, does it matter how skinny my jeans are? It doesn't even matter. So, but I think it transitioned me into a spot where I go, I can trust them to lead one another. You know, they've been discipled and mentored for long enough that they're naturally going to be relevant to one another because they are who they're trying to reach. So anyway, it was a relieving transition for me to be like, I no longer have to play the role of peer. I don't have to be the one they're seeking after to like hang out with or be with, but their friends, their peers are the ones doing it for us. So anyway.
What you guys are talking about is the shift, the transition, moving from player to coach. And, some people try to hold on a little bit too long, and they're 35, 40 plus still playing a sport, and they've got kids of their own. And at some point, it goes, the baton gets passed in athletics to the next generation. And, it's two different skill sets. You kind of get hired in ministry because you're competent at doing some things, carrying out some tasks, be it media production, singing, leading worship, stacking chairs, whatever it is. And then there is this shift of like, oh, I'm hired here, at least biblically. Ephesians 4 talks about equipping the saints. You use the word empowering the young adults to do the work of the ministry. I love it. One of the, and I think especially in young adult ministry, it's really rare to reach the point that you guys have just described, like even 11 years in young adult ministry. That is a long time. That is very unusual across the country. And I would imagine even locally in Las Vegas. But one of the messages for leaders is unpack your bags and stay a while.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Mhm.
all know what Clay Scroggins says in his book, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. Sometimes decisions about your future are made without you in the room. And whether it's to switch roles or to switch, maybe your services are no longer, maybe you need to take your talents elsewhere. There are those
Yeah.
moments too. But
Yeah.
I think as far as it's up to us, let's not let young adult ministry be a stepping stone or just exist to meet our own needs as a
Right.
leader.
That's good.
I think I want to hear each of your thoughts, Shelby and Dillon. How important is longevity in leading the next generation?
Oh man, I feel like we could have a whole podcast on just this one topic. Um, One of the things we are so blessed to be on staff at a church where longevity is the norm.
Wow.
Our senior leaders are our founding pastors,
Wow.
and we just celebrated 42 years. So they
My
have been our
goodness.
senior pastors for the last 42 years.
Mhm.
They were younger than us when they planted,
Mhm.
and now their grandkids are in our young adult ministry.
Mhm.
and
What a
so
legacy.
and so that seems to be the norm. We just had, yes, it's really is a blessing, especially being some of the youngest on staff. It gives us a lot to just a lot to look up to, a lot to glean from. And one of the things that I think that we have gotten to bear witness to now, having some skin in the game, is that any sort of change takes time. Can God
Yeah.
do something instantaneous? Absolutely. And we have had those smaller amounts of stories where God has changed someone's life like overnight,
Yep.
and it's really radical and that kind of thing. But the majority of time is we're seeing a slow progression in change, in influence, in even in our own leadership, in our cult, or in our character development, in our knowledge and wisdom. All of that takes time. And I had we meet a retired pastor couple. They've been in ministry for 50 plus years, and they meet with us once a month. I meet with the wife, he meets with the husband. And one of the things that my mentor was saying was that ministry is like when you're cooking meat, and the longer that it sits when you marinate it, the richer the flavor is going to be. And so when you're willing to put in more time, devote more time, whether it's to a role or on staff at a place, the richer it's going to be.
Beautiful.
And now that's not always going to be the case, but I think that that is kind of our approach with longevity in ministry, is that you're gonna get a better flavor at the end of the day.
That's good.
Um, I, I think about the story of Paul when he gets radically saved from honestly just murdering and imprisoning Christians. He gets saved, and one of the first interactions he has with Ananias after the road to Damascus, he gets transformed. He walks in, and Ananias calls him a brother. And the call of somebody walking in and calling them a brother who you know are murdering and imprisoning not only God's people, but people exactly like Ananias. Knowing him, knowing his history, knowing who he is, and calling him something like brother is such a significant statement of redemption and restoration, not only what God was doing in Paul's life, but also just relationally between two people, two individuals. When I think about my longevity here at the church, one of the challenges that it brings is that because I've been here for 23 years, I started attending here when I was 9. Um, it's it's there's people here who look at me and they go, I remember. Like I
Totally.
remember when you were a youth. I remember when you struggled. I remember when you made difficult decisions that a lot of us were like, ugh, you know. Um, the relationship growth that has come from that restoration, from that healing process. One of our executive pastors, his name's Pastor Steve. He was my young adult pastor when I was a young adult here, and he mentored me through a lot of my time pursuing ministry. every now and again a conversation comes up and he goes, I remember like when that relationship ended in your life, or that friend betrayed you, or one of those milestones in your life, you came into my office and you were crying and you were broken and you were hurting. Do you remember that? And sometimes I need that reminder as not only as a humbling experience, but also because sometimes I think in the moment that something is insurmountable, and he reminds me of things that God has brought me through in the past that he walked through with me. He intimately is able to sink into that moment of, I remember when you made it through that. Do you remember that? And that only comes with longevity. That only comes with being rooted for a long period of time, maintaining those relationships. So even for those who, let's say, as you mentioned, Josiah, like maybe circumstances are out of your control for shifting. I always encourage maintaining every relationship that you can, even from those prior churches or the prior places that you come from, because those people know you so intimately well. They can speak to those situations in the future to encourage you, to empower you, to recall the things that maybe even you have forgotten when you've been blinded by maybe circumstances, difficulties, or the enemy. That they can call you in and they can call you brother. And they can go, I know where you've been, I know what you've been doing, but I'm calling you brother as restoration, as redemptive, as speaking life into who God has you to be next. And that comes with longevity of relationships.
I think that's also very rare for your like lead pastors to be there for 42 years, for you guys to be in a young adult ministry role for 11 years. Sure. And that's where I think with Josiah and I, we come across people who are just starting out, like in ministry with young adults, whether it's youth, next gen, whatever. It's like, we want to challenge them and encourage them, like begin with the end in mind. Like at the end of the day, like if your ultimate goal is to be lead pastor, then maybe the stepping stone for you to be here is not here, because you're going to crush so many people in the process. So it's really just being mindful of like, how are we getting rooted, not only in Christ, but how are we calling out greatness? Like you said, Dillon, when Pastor Steve like pulls you aside, it's like, remember this. Hey, remember this time. Because those are the people that can speak into your life, not really like throw it in your face of like, this is who you once you were, but this is how far you've come. And this is how much God has done. And if we as leaders in the ministry world can do that for the next generation and remain a form of constant in the life, which is so inconsistent on every level. They don't know up from down, left to right, what's for supper, I don't know, where am I going to school, like all the questions and in between, like the big ones and the small decisions. But if you remain constant, hey, Tuesday night, my house is always open for you. If that's been an open door for 10 years, when poop hits the fan, they're going to know where to go on a Tuesday night.
Right.
I had some incredible wisdom from our general superintendent. His name is Brett Allen, an incredible guy. We were talking to him about this kind of relationship between staff pastors and senior pastors. And one of the things that he said that was so significant to me, he said, if you are a staff pastor who is transitioning churches a lot, you're kind of transient all the time. When you become a senior pastor, you're almost going to place that expectation on your staff. Or if you're a staff pastor who is kind of always griping and complaining and whining about your senior pastor, when you become a senior pastor, you're going to perceive your staff pastors as doing that. He said, the staff pastor that you are will likely be the staff pastors that you have when you're a senior pastor, even if that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so sometimes I think about, look, I have no plans to be a senior pastor in the future, but if I do, and I am, what type of staff pastors do I want? That's the pastor that I want to be today, because that will be what I expect and what I have as staff pastors in the future. So
I think it goes back to listening, like scripture, like what you reap is what you sow.
Just gonna say that.
And it could be an insecure thought. It could be your own insecurity. It could be the gift of gab that turns into gossip, like whatever it is, it's just like being mindful, like what we reap is what we sow. And I love how you said earlier, Dillon, and I think we'd all agree, like, we're going to leave no matter what position. If we get called out, asked to leave, we're going to leave well.
Yeah.
And we're going to leave people in places better than we found them. Like, that's one of our mottos in our house. If it's a restaurant, we're at Chick-fil-A, we're going to leave this booth better than we found it. And we're going to leave people better than we found them. So I just think that's an amazing insight from your pastor, your district leader that you ran into.
Yeah.
No kidding. And you guys are, man, in ministry together. And one of the trends I notice is couples want to do ministry together. And That's the case for us. We have the joy. It's an honor. It's a privilege. Let's talk about leading together in ministry. Do each of you maybe have one do and one don't?
Oh, that's good.
Well, okay. It's been, I want to preface by saying that Dylan and I do not have this all figured out. I wish that we were the pros at this. And it is always, it feels like it's always just a learning season of how to balance our marriage and ministry and how those things work together. But then also, we've had to recognize over the years what is worth, like, not worth the fight, and what is something that God has put in his hands that he has not put in mine, and vice versa. But then learning to serve each other out of that place, not fight for leadership. So, and that was, I think, earlier on in our, not only our marriage, but earlier on in our ministry roles. It was trying to figure out the balance in that. And so we have found that there are certain ways, like certain etiquettes, if you will, of being co-workers in the same work environment that we have to be black and white about. And then there's other things where we get to lean more into our marriage and the benefit of being each other's suitable helper, if you will.
Yes.
And so, like, as an example, because Dylan is our media production pastor and I work on our next gen team, there are times where in my meetings with my team, we'll say something like, oh, let's film a video for this. Let's reach out to Dylan. And my team lead will be like, Shelby, can you do that? And there are times where I have to say, actually, I would prefer if somebody else on the team does it. Why? Because I know that we're asking last minute. I want to make Dylan, I don't want to use and abuse Dylan as my spouse and make him feel like he has to do something because he's my spouse. I think for us, we have found that there are different ways that we can work as black and white coworkers and preserve our marriage and relationship. And that just being one silly way. So then I might ask somebody else on my team, hey, can you formally fill out this request, submit it to the media production team, and go that avenue so that way I don't make Dylan feel as though I'm trying to take advantage of him as my husband, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To summarize that kind of into a do's and don'ts, I think the biggest advantage for us is to provide healthy boundaries. I'm a person who, if you pass me in the hallway and you go like, hey, could you do this? There's a 100% chance that I'm going to forget. There's no chance.
Yeah.
There's no chance I'm going to remember. And so sometimes when people take advantage of, let's say, Shelby in that way of like, hey, could you ask him this, whatever. I think early in our relationship, Shelby would kind of pass me and go, oh, by the way, someone needs this or someone needs this. And they were using Shelby as an informal way to get to me. And so I made the boundary of like, look, hey, if you want to agree, meaning, Shelby, if you want to agree to like, put something in for somebody or whatever, I'm just asking that if it's work related, follow the procedures, fill out the forms, send me the email.
Yeah.
If you want to set a meeting over a video or something that we're filming, just shoot me an email, say, hey, we want to meet about this. Literally, we have a meeting on the calendar right now to talk about a video for young adults and our next gen department. And it's because we don't want our dinner time to turn into that discussion. We don't want our date night to turn into that discussion. And so creating the boundary of we will schedule a meeting during work hours where we will talk about that video and we will have that meeting or whatever, so that when it comes to dinner time, we know either we've already had that conversation or we're going to have that conversation tomorrow or the next day during the appropriate times. And then if I were to say don't, I think the biggest struggle for me personally that I would recommend not doing is, especially when it comes to relationships in ministry, don't compare yourself to another relationship.
Wow.
There's a lot of relationships at our church that are couples in ministry. And to be honest, everyone looks differently. So early on in our relationship, I picked one of those couples that I like the most, just personally, who I'm like, I really like them as a couple. And I was like, I want to be like them. And so early on in our ministry, I wondered why, well, how come he doesn't function more like, this person's spouse does? How come I don't function more like this husband does? And how can I strive to be that way? And first of all, we're not those people. So the same thing is not going to work for us. But number two, we're called to different things. Not only
Mhm.
Shelly and I, the unique ministries we're called to, so we're called to different things than that couple is called to. And so it doesn't make sense that we function identically. So I think that for us, we look and we go, hey, there's some things that we love about this relationship, and there's some things that wouldn't work for us. It's okay to have mentors in other couples, but comparing the relationship for me was really unhealthy because it stirred up a lot of questions of, well, why aren't we more like this, or how come we're not like that? And I think it harmed my perspective of what being a couple in ministry looked like for us. So I would
That's so
advise
good.
having mentors, but not comparing.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. It's like comparison is the thief of joy. And I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
similarly, we talked about leading together. We talked about ministry and longevity.
Mhm.
I just want to comment, Micah and I just watched a little bit of a talk from Dr. Mel Robbins.
Mhm.
And she was talking about how relationships, friendships essentially are different as adults than as like child and
Mm,
adolescence. Like,
Yeah.
and the biggest thing is
yeah.
in school, primarily, like a lot of our lives, K through 12, you're surrounded by a group of peers really that are the same age. You get more into the workforce after college if you go, and it's just totally different. And so I think this is why many leaders, single or married, find themselves lonely in ministry. And that's not the case for us or you
Yeah.
guys. We found you guys to be some amazing friends in ministry. And
Well, with that study, I'll just
yeah,
share this. The
yeah,
thing they really talked about when you're younger, like you are spending time with these peers every single day and you are in proximity every single day. And then for summer sports
Yeah.
or whatever sport you're in, you are on a team
yep.
and your team changes. The moment you're 18, 19, 20, you're going to college, you're going into the military, you're going into the workforce, whatever you're doing, you're no longer on that team. So you're like this solo
Yeah.
tennis player wondering when's the next match and who can I, how can I get
Yeah.
involved? But the reality is, like she talked about, in order to have a decent, good, meaningful friendship, you need to spend 200 hours together.
Mhm.
Who in the
Yeah.
world right now, aside from your spouse, are you even close enough proximity to spend
Yeah.
200 hours with? That's not a
Yeah.
coworker where
Yeah.
you're in the same space, but you're in a different season of life. Oh, you're single. Oh, you're married. Oh, you're almost retired. Oh, you're, whatever. So it was just a very interesting study to kind of bring forth this awareness of like between the ages of 18 to 30, there's a lot of life happening. Between the ages of 18 and 35, you are making 85% of life's biggest decisions. So to come alongside those people and to create opportunities for those people, not only for Christ, not only for church, but for community,
Yeah.
where they can
Yeah.
actually, how do I spend not 1 hour in somebody's basement for a Bible study or 2 hours with somebody and expect like this, where's my next best friend? I didn't meet anybody.
Yeah.
You spent 90 minutes together and you expected to walk
Yeah.
away with this deep, meaningful friendship and you hardly said boo. So it's like, it's really
Yeah. Yeah.
it's teaching young adults how to critical think, how to put themselves out there, how to ask deep, meaningful questions, and maybe do some soul searching in the process. So those are just some things that I reflected on. Like that was like one of the best 3 or 4 minute clips that I've seen to really unpack some of the questions I've been having of like, how do we get young adults connected? They need to spend time with each other.
Yep.
Like a shepherd only
Hmm.
smells like the sheep when they're spending time with the sheep. The sheep only know who each other are when they're spending time with each other. And then when the shepherd's gone, like you said, like it's kind of rewarding when they don't invite me. I don't have to be bonking everybody
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
head,
Yeah.
telling them what time to be where.
Yeah.
They organize it
Can
themselves.
can I tell you? And some of they're so good sometimes at being connected. I was joking around with one of our young adults who works. We have a private school associated with our church, and one of our young adults works there. And she was sitting on her lunch break, and she's like holding up her phone, and she's like talking on her lunch break, and she's like eating and whatever. And I was like, "What? Like, what are you doing?" And so like I kind of stick my head in, and she's FaceTiming one of our other young adults who is currently back home in Utah
Wow.
on vacation,
Wow.
and they're FaceTiming and they're talking on their lunch break. And so as a joke, I kind of popped my head in and I was like, hey, like we talked and joked and whatever. And I honestly walked away from that and I thought to myself, like, do I sometimes overcomplicate some of the relationships in my life where like I have to be sitting down at coffee with somebody, or I have to be getting dinner, or I have to be doing whatever. Meanwhile, why don't I just simply send somebody a Marco Polo,
Totally.
or let me send them a video, message to their, just text it to them, or like an audio message via message, or whatever it is that works for it. I thought they seem to be, it's so natural for them to just be like, I'm going to FaceTime them on my lunch break. And I'm like, man, have I just overcomplicated relationships in my life?
Yes.
Like, connecting is easier than ever
Wow.
because of technology, because of my phone in my pocket. And yet I've been like, well, if I'm not sitting down to coffee, or if we're not getting dinner regularly, it's like there's so many other methods of connection.
Yeah.
If I'm just willing to use them, I think I can stay connected to my friends so much better. Even like you guys. I mean, we've chatted so much via group chats, and we've probably communicated more via Zoom calls because of leadership meetings and all that other kind of stuff. I felt more connected to you guys than even sometimes people that I work with, because the only
Wow.
place I ever see them is at work.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's wild. It makes me think of a story. So I called a friend probably in 2021, hopefully coming out of COVID-ish. And I ended up praying with her at the end. I never offered to pray for her before. She was my college roommate my sophomore year. So I've known her for 20 years. And she like started crying. She's like, Micah, I never thought to just pick up the phone and call anybody during COVID. And I'm like,
mm,
we use
what?
text so much. Like text has been so saturated. You don't hear
Yeah.
back, so you don't think they care. But I'm like, so I call friends who are like, what's wrong? And I'm like, nothing's
Yeah.
wrong. Like I just want to say hello.
This is called a phone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Ah.
yeah.
So
And the
it's
one thing we don't do,
overcomplicating
the
it.
one thing we don't do is talk on it. It's like
Oh my,
all these
with
apps.
everything else
Yeah.
but
Device.
talking
Oh
on
yeah.
it. Oh my goodness. Go ahead.
But no, you guys
Yeah.
like we like my hope is for the listener is maybe you're like, hey, I'm new to young adult ministry. First of all, welcome. And the work you're doing is vital. You're making a
Yeah.
difference. We're cheering you on. And what we've all
Absolutely.
experienced, Micah and I and Dillon and Shelby, and just friendship with you guys has been a blessing in our life. And I mean, a couple of the ways that people could literally get plugged into the community of young adults today. One is coaching communities. The other is the West
Mhm.
Coast Leader Conference. You've been at both.
Mhm.
You've been in both. Talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
maybe your experience in either.
Oh man, it's so good. I think we are better when we link arms. And one of the things that have been so vital to me and my ministry leadership development has been seeing what other people not only are doing and doing better, but honestly, when people are also in the trenches, because I don't feel alone,
Mhm.
or I don't
Mhm.
feel like the black sheep, like, oh, I should have this figured out and I don't, and other people are doing it better. Like it reminds me of the fullness of God through the variety of gifts and talents that he gives out, and that we get a better, fuller, was like a well-rounded table with all of these different people at it. And so it's been so cool and honestly beneficial to our ministry, being able to connect with these other leaders across the nation, really.
Mhm.
I mean, now we've not met, but like we've
Yeah.
connected with online, and met some in person, from Florida to Texas to California to, Arizona. And so, and then hearing what they're doing well, and then now being able to, because we're in relationship, follow up and say, hey, you do this social media thing super well. What is some of your top tips? And some of the stuff that I have learned by simply just asking, because the relationship was there to be able to even ask, and then implement. And what I have found is, I have not really experienced another leader who has been shut off to the idea of sharing. So
Wow.
every leader is like, yes, let me tell you, I'm going to send you exactly what we do. I'm going to
Mhm.
send you materials.
Mhm.
I'm going to send you the resources or the book I read or whatever that inspired this idea. I'm going to show you exactly how we structure it.
Mhm.
And that has been so beautiful to not only feel alone, feel seen, but then also have a community of people who are doing it and sometimes doing different things better than me, and being able to learn from them. So it's really been well-rounded. And a bonus is that we also get to make friendships. I think we've gotten to build such a cool friendship with you guys through this community that without this community, it would not be possible. You guys are, 3 hours difference away from us. And so It was through this community that we were able to build such a relationship and friendship with you guys. So we're thankful for that.
Yeah. I remember shortly after Shelby joined, she joined first that kind of leadership connect, the coaching community. And I remember she comes to me a little bit afterward and she goes, "Hey, how do you feel if I take a girls trip to San Francisco?" And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, is there some people from our church going? Like, do you know somebody's going?" And she's like, "No, I actually met this really cool young adult pastor who's out in San Francisco and she's really great. I met her through the Connect and I'm thinking about going out there just visiting for a couple of days. What do you think?" And I was like, "What? Like, you're gonna go?" Yeah, totally. Like, go. And so since then, plans have been made to go there. Plans have been made for her to come here. And it's funny because I think that it was almost, I mean, I think I've been to a lot of conferences. I've been to a lot of, Zoom Connects, and never once have I ever felt this comfortability with somebody to be like, I'm going to go visit them. And for Shelby to have that interaction with somebody on the coaching community, on the West Coast Leader Conference, for her to have that level of connection with somebody, it was like, wow, like this is significant. Like I've been on a lot of Zoom calls. I haven't felt that way. It feels much more impactful that there's an opportunity, a place for relationships. At the West Coast Leaders Conference, I experienced the same thing where people are just so willing to share. Like there's things that I'm good at, and then there's things that I'm terrible at. And what was really helpful to me was to talk to people who were so good at things that I'm so bad at. And the way that they made it seem so simple of like, hey, here's a couple short steps I would do if I were you to just improve what you're doing in this area. What it means for me is freedom of the pressure of feeling like I have to be good at everything. It means I get to be good at the thing that I'm good at, and the things that I'm weak in, I have quality leaders who are giving me my next steps to improve my ministry in ways that I don't think that I ever could on my own. And it's invaluable to me. It's invaluable to my ministry, and I think the work of God here in Las Vegas.
I love that. And that's one of our prayers, is that whatever people choose to get involved with young adults today, that they would feel connected to each other. They would feel resourced. They would feel like they're building a portfolio of whatever that looks like, of ideas or brainstorming or like just processing. And I think when you're leading, like leadership can be very lonely. And that's a choice.
Absolutely.
That's a choice, right? And when you position yourself and you throw yourself out there, we've met you guys, we've met a couple of other people from Missouri that just moved a couple of states away now, but like they were digital friends. Like we came across them and like, we're meeting in real life. Like you do exist. And we were just out in Tennessee, met another friend that I met 4 years ago, finally was able to meet her in person. So it's just kind of crazy of how social media has been able to connect. And I think the generation, millennials, Gen Z, millennials are adapting to the collaboration.
Yeah.
Gen Z wants to collaborate. And a form of collaboration is sharing our wisdom, our talents, our times, our treasures, our approaches. Doesn't mean that we're cookie cutter Christians and we take what they're doing and do exactly the same to replicate it. But it's like, you're doing something right and I can learn something from you. So there's this humble approach. I feel that young adult ministry leaders, for the majority, are willing to lean into and glean insight from. So I just appreciate you guys so much, of like not only what you're doing, but what you're allowing God to do, and just like your zeal for life and just your willingness to serve a generation that is lost, that is broken, that does want breakthrough and is seeking healing, and they want truth in the process. So I know our time's coming to an end, but we have 5 minutes on the clock. Are you guys up for the 5 and 5 challenge?
Let's go. Let's go. I told Shelby, I was like, we have to be ready with real quick. Like, I know how the podcast goes. We gotta bust out these last 5 minutes.
Okay. So is it going to be ladies first with every question? Yeah. Is that going to help out?
I vote yes.
Is that okay? Do you want it to be like that? Like we both, so it's 2 minutes per question, 1 minute each person. Okay.
We'll do 30 seconds each answer.
30 seconds.
You're sharing your 5.
Yeah. Talk
They're
fast,
not too hard. Fast. Okay. This is it. Okay, Shelby, you can do this. What is your dream in a sentence? Dillon, you're gonna get the same question, so you better think hard.
My mind went blank. Okay. Man, I want to build something that outlives me. That's my dream for the Lord. I want to advance His kingdom and build something that outlives me.
I really want to disciple and see God's people grow. There's nothing that gets me more excited than when people have a breakthrough moment.
Awesome.
It's incredible. What about you guys are a little bit like us. You serve your district. For us, it's
Mhm.
Minnesota. You guys, it's Nevada, Northern California. But talk about just a
Mhm.
second of like your experience in like working together with other churches and a network of other young adult pastors.
You want that in 30 seconds?
Yeah, 30 seconds. Go.
It has been so inspiring and so humbling at the same time. And one of the things that has really been such a blessing is being able to talk to senior pastors and talk about the vitality and the need for young adult ministry,
Mm-hmm.
not even to have a formal young adult ministry, but how at a foundational level, at a senior leadership level, are you reaching young adults who are just attending on a Sunday? And so that's been really cool. Big advocate for seeing young adults reached in the local church.
It's
Awesome.
incredible.
I love serving young adult pastors. On a district level, I love that as pastors, of course, we do a lot of pouring out, a lot of serving others. It's exciting on a district level to say, hey, I know you're tired. I know you're exhausted. Let us serve you. How can you come and just participate? How can you come and just be involved? It's also what I love about the West Coast Leadership Conference. I get to go and be a part of what God is doing, and so often I feel like people are serving us in that moment, and it's just refreshing and a blessing to us. So anyway, that's why I love being a part of the district.
Amazing. Okay, question number 3. What is a hobby outside of ministry you enjoy doing for fun?
Snowboarding.
Yeah, yeah.
So Vegas is not known for its snow, but actually we have a mountain about 45 minutes from the Las Vegas Strip where we have a ski resort. It's not great. It's not the Rockies, but it does the job. And then we can also go to Utah, which is like a 2-hour drive, and they have some great ski resorts there. So we love to snowboard in the winter.
Love it.
Team sports. I like playing basketball and I like playing softball.
Cool.
So fun. If you guys could ask Micah and I any question, you're the hosts now, we're the guests. What question are we answering?
Yeah. Ladies first, Ethan.
I would say, um, where do you guys see yourself? Maybe it's a dream, maybe it's the direction you feel like the Lord's taking you. Where do you guys see yourself in 20 years?
Oh man, great question.
20
I
is
see
a
myself.
big number.
It is.
Life
I'm
goes
dreaming big.
fast.
We're talking
Yeah, yeah.
now.
Life
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
fast. Oh, you want to go first?
I love what you said about building something that outlasts
Mm-hmm.
us for God's kingdom and glory.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think that as we transition and as the ministry continues to grow but evolve as we age, it's the empowerment. So it's like, who are we empowering, who are we leading, who are we mentoring, who are we discipling, and what is our role? Like, we're gonna have to phase out at some point. I'm not saying it's 20 years from now, but at some point we want to be able to hand something off, whether it's to our children or to whomever, that we want to live and leave a legacy bigger than ourselves. And I think we can start doing that by living and building it now, not wishing it on our deathbed.
I heard Levi and Jenny Lusko, they talked about, and a lot of their mentors said, don't go to Montana. And they were living in SoCal, I believe, at the time. And they felt like a draw to go plant a church in Montana. They didn't know if it would work, but they said, let's give it 5 years. Let's give God 5 years. And I don't think there's anything spiritual or mystical or magical or even like copycat. Like, I'm not projecting, like, but I think there's something to be said about like, hey, we're going to give God a go and we're going to give it a go.
Mhm.
And I think it's just harder to do that in like weeks, months, or a year. And so I think just like things of great value take time to deploy and to develop and to discover. So we're with it. We're on the journey. I think that, of course, things will change, but I definitely feel like a burden and a passion of young adults. And
Mhm.
I think we've tried to do other things, and this is what it feels like, God's lane, God's assignment. Not sure about 20 years, but at this point, we don't sense another exit or
Mhm.
off ramp, you know?
Right.
It's
Right.
just like this is the tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Praise God.
If you there's been some young adults who have really blessed me in the time that I've been a pastor. And some of those have been kind of defining for me. I learned a lot about myself when young adults blessed me, but also I learned a lot about young adult ministry. Is there any one young adult or two young adults maybe that you think back of who have been in your ministry who you feel like maybe blessed you as much as maybe you were a blessing to them? What happened? What did they do? How did they bless you?
Hmm. I think of back when we did Chi Alpha. There's one thing about young adult ministry. You might not ever hear thank you from young adults, but
Mm,
but you know that they're thankful, if that makes sense.
yeah.
And I think back
Yeah.
to somebody I used to mentor on a college campus, and I'd meet with her every day that I was on campus. So at least once a week, we were meeting for an hour or sometimes 2 hours, unpacking the skeletons in the closet, we'll say, and just their life
Yeah.
decisions and the relationships and the 2, 3 that were on the table and the one that she was in, the one that she wanted to be with, and all these other things. And I think what blessed me the most out of that was one, being invited to her wedding, two, her
Mm,
dedicating her life to the Lord, from purity, from
mm,
making decisions and marrying a Christian. I think that's a rewarding side of things. And I think I could speak into her life and the relationship dynamic to the level that I could while calling her out and up and pointing her to God. I think it's just rewarding to see. It's like it blessed me because I was able to use my testimony to share with her why she shouldn't be doing what she's doing because she knows it's wrong for one, but also coming alongside her in that journey for over probably 2, 3 years and really wrestling down some major idols of marriage and men and sex and just all those things that the world offers, to see those chains literally broken. I don't know. I think it's such an honor to let somebody come alongside, like allowed me to come alongside them. And I think that was so life-giving for me.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. That's what I think of.
Oh my gosh. This is like next level question. I want to shout out like I think no less than 100 people like it's been such a blessing, such a gift. The prayers, the encouragement.
Hmm.
Even like one wild thing, I wasn't even going to say this, but like it seems like a lot of the people that we did life in ministry with are now the ones who fund young adults today as a ministry.
Hmm. Totally. That's what I was
And
yeah.
thinking.
so like
Yep.
Wow.
there's this Louis Giglio quote that I often think about, like the church of Jesus isn't built on the talents of a few, but the sacrifice of many. So I think of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
many who sacrifice so that, young adults can be reached for Christ, leaders can be trained. Man, I think of, there was so many.
There is a lot.
I
That
think
one
of a
stood out to me
few,
first.
a few real quick. Sam is a young adult that I've just had a mentoring relationship with, and somewhere along the line, it became friendship, and it also like I feel like he's taught me so much of what it is like in 2023 and 4 and 5 to be a
Mm,
young adult, to be single, to be dating, to be considering a cross country move. Like I, I need to be reminded of that. I think as pastors, we've been married now 7.5 years, and especially for those listening that maybe it's been longer,
Hmm.
to have somebody that's single in your life reminding you what it's like to,
Be a single in this day and age.
for sure,
yeah.
or the
Yeah.
workplace questions. I think that just the questions that he asks. There was a young adult who came to the West Coast conference, and his starting the conference by doing a backflip off the stage. That blessed
Hmm.
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I that on video.
oh my gosh. I think of
These
there
young, you got the young names.
I
Young and agile.
you mentioned
Yeah.
Kyle,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
there's been people even like Cedar Valley. I think of like the kind of the tribe of like all of the small group leaders. That blessed me to see them open up their dorms, open up their homes, open the Justin Arnolds, the Steven Swansons, the Peter Cassidis.
Hmm.
He texted me today, the Chris
Oh.
Roushes, the
It's the joy of seeing somebody else have that aha or breakthrough moment that it's just like
Yeah.
you feel like a parent and you're like, yeah, it's like the slow
Yeah.
golf
Yeah.
clap, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yay, finally. But it's like
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
much joy filled in those moments of saying like God is moving and God is alive and he wants to do something in every single one of us. It's just like, do they have somebody to process that with? So when they do allow you to be a part of their story, which sometimes we don't ask, sometimes they do, and it's like, wow, only God. So that was like our 10-minute
I
answer.
think I think I think something so pivotal to what you said. we talked earlier about longevity, and you talked about, like, unpacking for a minute. Just, I think you said that, like, unpacking in ministry and sitting for a minute. What both of you mentioned about those stories is, like, Micah, for you, you mentioned the girl who you were kind of ministering to, and she was struggling with some relationships, and then later on you got to go to her wedding. For you guys who Josiah, you mentioned young adults who you poured into, who now, like, they're functioning in ministry, they're pursuing more wisdom and knowledge through things like the Young Adult Today podcast. Both of those things required you to unpack in their lives. Like, for you to sit and go, I'm invested in you in the long term. Right now, you don't have this, significant, relationship that's maybe healthy yet, but we're going to get you there. Like, it's going to take time. I'm going to sit with you through this. We're going to talk through this. And then on the other side of this, you're going to have a healthy, thriving relationship that we get to celebrate together. But as the young adult leader, it requires you to unpack for a minute in people's lives. Like, that one coffee meeting that you had with that student the first time was not going to solve all of their problems.
Right.
It was going to take you walking with her through time. And that's what longevity looks like when you're unpacking in ministry. It's not only unpacking at your church and being invested in your church for a long time, but it's meeting a young adult and saying, I'm walking with you for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 10 years, however long, because I'm ready to see you married into a healthy, thriving relationship, not only with a spouse, but also with God. I think that's what unpacking looks like. I think that's you living out exactly what you encourage people to do on this podcast. And I think it's so significant to be that invested into the lives of God's people. So
amazing. Thank you for saying that.
Oh my gosh, we love you guys. Thanks for saying that. Is there any last thoughts, word of encouragement inside? I mean, I feel like that was a beautiful bow, but just in case there's anything else.
Man, if there was one thing I could say to the listener, is that what you're doing matters. And there's going to be times in ministry where it feels like you're the only one that cares. You're the only one that sees young adults. You're the only one that's doing anything to make a difference. Maybe it feels like you're fighting even against your leadership for this. It's going to feel that way, but that feeling doesn't always reflect truth. And so the truth is that you are making a difference, and that God sees you, and God's in your corner. God is advocating for you because he is advocating for the young adults that you are leading. And it is important. And I think that as leaders, we have all experienced the times where behind closed doors, we've shed tears, or we felt the burden or the weight that is really an honor that God puts on us, but we get to have shared that burden that God feels for a specific ministry. For us, it's young adults. Right. And just because you have felt that way doesn't mean you're alone. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have value, and that you're not making a difference, because you are. And so just keep going. Just keep going. Don't give up. That's what I would say.
That's good.
I would really encourage to take the first step in a relationship. I know that, like, for Josiah and Micah, you guys, I mean, I don't remember what the first initial contact was, but sometimes when you see somebody at a conference and you kind of see them in a distance and they're talking to somebody or whatever, my initial response, my natural response, is to go, oh, they're busy. They don't have time for me. I think it's easy for me to go, they're too busy. I'm not going to go say hi. I'm not going to go connect. And I think in the past maybe 5, 6 years, I have seen the small things that we've done, like after a conference or after a speaker or after a lecture, or sometimes after I listen to a podcast. It's, hey, I'm going to go ahead and text the number that this podcast encouraged me to text to connect or to comment, or I'm going to see them in a conference. You know what? I'm just going to go say hi. I don't need to have something like profound to say or an impactful question. But I just want to go introduce myself, because you never know what those relationships not only are gonna pan out to, but also just allowing yourself to be seen. Be okay being seen. You are significant. People care. They want to care deeply. And all it requires is that initial interaction. Send the text, make the comment, or approach somebody at a conference. Just say, hey, this is my name. I really appreciate what you said, what you did. I just wanted to come meet you. Those interactions are so significant. I know for me in ministry, I've developed so many relationships that started just like that. They were small, simple hellos, but they've made lasting connections, lasting relationships. So step out, say hi, because you are significant and people do care about you.
So good.
That is a load of encouragement. Thank you guys for just your friendship, your leadership, your consistency in our lives, in a generation's life. We are better and grateful because of it.
So good. Well, thank you guys.
We love you guys so much. We're praying for you guys and your family. I know you all matter so deeply to us, and I know that even as a family, like as a family in ministry, we know that you guys face unique struggles. So we're praying for you guys and the girls. We're excited.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Hey, this is the Young Adults Today podcast. And one quick thing, we just had a March Leaders Conference. Annually, leaders from over 10 states and Canada gather together in Minneapolis, Minnesota to grow together as leaders. Check out this highlight video.